wouldn't blank be better right now? And the answer is like almost always yes. So then you incorrectly try to get that next time, and it doesn't end up working out so well. So, for instance, with the Immortals, technically I could get a robotics facility. I could begin getting Immortals. But of course, that's going to cut into my gateway count significantly. That's going to delay me getting my Twilight Council, which of course delays Templars and delays more upgrades. And Immortals are also a little bit slow, and I like having this really, really fast, really mobile army. Not to say that Immortals are bad by any means, but by focusing just on the gateway units, I'm cutting out all the resources to get any other building except more gateways and gateway-focused things. So I like that. And this is a little bit of an issue that I think a lot of, especially players in the gold level, or probably, I guess now it would be platinum, or even low diamond, where because their opponent might not have the best macro or the most refined play, this gold, platinum, diamond level player is able to get a High Templar, Immortal, Colossus, Gateway army and does crush his opponent. But the problem comes when you're playing against someone who has very crisp timing. Suddenly you don't quite have the ability to get those Colossi up. You just don't have the time. Somehow you don't quite have the ability to get all those Immortals that you wanted. And your army has one of each thing that makes it good, but overall it's just a small army, so it ends up falling apart. Because the more different types of units you want to get, the less money you have to just get units, because you have to get all the various tech structures. That's part of the reason why, players, Terran players for the longest time would just make barracks, because all the barracks units are relatively strong, and you can keep making them. Of course, you do end up needing to get other types of units just to bolster, obviously like the tank or other things like that. But that is the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of the Immortal in this case right now. I would prefer either to go Immortals and Warp Gates, or go Warp Gates and Templar. That's the sort of battle I'm dealing with in my head. So let us take some more questions. I will scroll down because... oh yeah, people asking why I have Archon hate. That's just a little joke I've been playing around with a friend. Just because the Archon was such a frightening unit in Brood War, and it is such a not frightening unit in Starcraft too. It's like an Archon comes out and it's like, and then he just gets like one-shotted. So, great against Zerglings though. Sure works well against Zerglings. Gonna wait for the day when players are making a lot of Zerglings instead of Roach Hydras, and I will make Archons after I storm and have my Warp Gate units out. Yes. Let us divine. So Jinjo Bust says, do you think that if the Zerg had attempted to macro up instead of going for the jugular with a counterattack after your push failed, it would have given you far more issues? Yes, I definitely think it would have given me a few more issues. However, I do want to note that, let's say he took out that bottom right. Let's say he started to make more drones. And when I say the bottom right, I mean the rocks, so he can expand his gold. So if he had taken the gold, if he'd added on more drones, note that in the midst of that counterattack, I had a ton of units after I held it off. Because again, I had 8 warp gates and horrible macros at like 2,000. So I think I would have been able to do a little bit more aggression there. But yeah, I still think I would have been in okay shape. The big thing I'm concerned about is I had a lot of warp gate units at his front, and I was really in his face. And I was kind of like, what do I do now? It's like the first time I'd ever gotten to this point. I was like, all right, sweet. I didn't die to the roaches. I got my 5 warp gates. I got to skip the forge. All right, and then you saw him just surround and kill me. And it was a little bit bumpy of a transition to get those Templar out, so I need to work on that. Perhaps it means that I should just throw down force fields and retreat early. I think that should be clever. Ooh, I think I'm onto something fancy. Like, for instance, keep a spotter by his destructible rock. Keep checking it. When it starts losing hit points, just force field his front, run south, and then pull back hard to the west or to the left, considering that we're not actually looking at a real map. So that would actually be pretty fancy and suave. Oh, great question by Patrick the First. Having watched your previous cast with the White Raw game, do you think you could incorporate warp prisms into your play to harass the Zerg's mineral line, considering he was only on 2 base for a while? brilliant, absolutely brilliant. What I would say even to further strengthen that is that when I'm taking my gold expo, that's about the time that I want to start actually getting observers and all that good jazz, because that's about the time when I'm really like, wow, I need to worry about more roaches and all that stuff. I might even maybe be getting it earlier on. But I can get the warp prism, doesn't cut into my gas count at all, and I only need to get like one. And then I can happily end up storming everything at his expo. So that actually is so cool. I want to do that. And you know, Noni was even mentioning that to me. The fact that there are no Scourge in StarCraft 2, and a lot of players are favoring Roach Hydra. So storms are going to be a lot stronger. He said, like, yeah, you can almost always have a whole bunch of warp prisms just floating around the map. Or not warp prisms, just, you know, not a bunch, but, you know, one or two or something like that. So I definitely want to do that. Yes. Allow me to. And here's another note by MTR PCIC Mitter Kick. So, day 9, do you think the build you did in the last game would have been more effective if you had several sentries in addition to your Templar? Yeah, you know, that's actually something that, that's one of those things that, it's a kink I want to work out over time. And actually, that example, obviously, yeah, I can get the sentry, and unlike, you know, with the example I talked about with the Immortals, a sentry is as easy as just building a sentry. Yeah, no extra tech switching needed, no extra buildings, just build a sentry. But it's important to note that I do a lot of deliberate practice. Like going into that game, I wanted to focus on trying to time some early attacks with my zealots, and my attack was okay, I kind of lost a lot. Trying to get my stalkers out, trying to skip the forge, and then also trying to go 8 warp gates with Templar tech. And just focus on having good unit movement and good expo timing. That's pretty much what I was focusing on. And also having better unit control, because I've actually been screwing that up a lot as of late. Just because I'm not playing as much as I should be. I'm being undisciplined, and I watched Season 1 of Leverage instead of working more. But anyways, once I start refining that, then I want to start thinking, okay, when do I exactly get the timing of that robotics facility? And let me just make sure that my unit composition is sculpted really nicely. Because to be honest, whether my unit composition looked good or bad at the end, really I was just spamming Zealots and Stalkers and Templar. I was not thinking enough during that stages of the game. Largely because, again, it's just not something that I was really focusing on. Just wanted to make sure that I was really looking at where my army was going. And I mentioned that once or twice, but again, in the game, I was thinking, make sure your army's in a good place, make sure your army's in a good place, make sure you're expanding, make sure you're macroing. Those were the 3 things that I was repeating to myself. And again, just want to work on that more and more and more. So absolutely, MTR PCIC is right. Absolutely, Patrick the First is right. These are other great things to incorporate that actually I didn't think of. So I'm glad that you're here to help check me. But it's important to note that, yeah, it's okay not to do that in a game that's a practice game. I said this was a practice game I played with Zion. I did mean that. Perhaps in a latter game, I might be trying to be a little bit more thinking, a little bit more like, wow, how can I win right now? But in those games, I was just like, happily going to practice exactly what I want. So I will just take, yeah, I can take 2 or 3 more questions. Plenty of time. Oh, yeah, that's one thing I wanted to say. I am not doing the cast at 7 p.m. tomorrow. I'm doing it at 8 p.m. because I will be buying BlizzCon tickets, so I want to be like the other nerds, just F5ing right at 7 p.m. So, yes. Shem Suhor says, Day 9, what could Zion have done to turn the tide in his favor? I feel boxed into my start and unable to transition and end up overly defensive. Is Nidus mobility the answer? So I think there's a few, it's like a little bit subtle, I think. Because again, your brain is your biggest enemy when you're trying to learn StarCraft. I have had to battle my head for years because your brain wants the, oh, if he does A, then do B. You know, oh, if he's attacking you and doing all this stuff, you Nidus Worm and you win. And it doesn't quite work like that, especially, I mean, everyone looks at Brood War and notes that there is a lot of complexity going on. And it's so important to just accept that there are some nice, easy solutions in some circumstances. You know, if he is not making any anti-air, you can go air and kill him. But I think Zion maybe could have squeezed out a few more drones, maybe made some extra spine crawlers instead of extra units. I think that would have been quite helpful. I do think his counterattack was perhaps a little bit too woundful of his main army and focus. But notice that when he came out and surrounded my army outside of his front, he didn't just defeat my army, he crushed my army. He like raped my army. And a lot of times people will look at that rape and go, oh, it's a good thing. Zion played correctly. He killed everything. Thumbs up. But you got to be a little careful when you think about what goes on afterwards. Because, yeah, the counterattack did a lot of damage. Or, excuse me, yeah, the counterattack, I managed to, like, barely defend. But right after he crushed my army, I still had a ton of probes. I was still able to rebuild enough units to defend a giant counterattack. And he still was behind on drones. So I think that maybe if he had made a few more drones, just squeezed out 4 extra drones, perhaps gotten an overseer to peer around the edge of my army so he didn't end up thinking it was